Hello everyone, this is Serious Trivia, and welcome back to our 7-year reign of Talpi Let's Talk Lore series as we continue with episode 3, titled The Mistakes of the Past. Now, in our first 2 episodes, we focused largely on Talpi's family affairs, but as we all know, a new dynasty does not only mean a new ruling clan, but also a new ruling government, and with it comes reforms. And like the Han Dynasty before it, the first few court reforms put in place by the Wei Dynasty focused largely on reasons that brought about the Han decline. So it should come as no surprise that Talpi's first reform dealt with eunuchs and the influence of eunuchs within the structure of the government. For those who are unaware, eunuchs are castrated male servants who serves the imperial clan within the imperial palace. And for the majority of Chinese history so far, eunuchs in general have remained largely just servants, with the occasional rise of a powerful or influential chief eunuch from time to time. But during the later periods of the Eastern Han Dynasty, the eunuchs as a collective group reached the height of their political power thanks to their role in helping Emperor Huan regain power from an overpowering regent. Now, for those of you who are interested in this coalition of a puppet emperor and his eunuchs that met in secret whenever the emperor had to take a number 2, I highly recommend our Fall of the Han Let's Talk Lore series, which goes in depth about how the eunuchs were able to help Emperor Huan and how in turn they receive unprecedented trust and political power that would eventually play an important role in dooming the Han. And without dwelling on the details of how the eunuchs got power, for this episode, we just need to know that the eunuchs in the later Eastern Han period evolved from mere servants to actual officials as they took over the post of Zhongchangshi. Now, this post was originally created in the late Western Han Dynasty to place 4 highly respected gentry clan scholars to become attendants to the emperor in order to provide the emperor with advice on the matters of the court. As a matter of fact, if you were to literally translate 中常侍 character by character, it would mean central constant attendant, as central implies the emperor who is the center of all things, and constant meant that these attendants were expected to be by the emperor's side at all times during working hours, helping to aid him on the matters of state. Unfortunately, with the rise of child emperors and then powerful regents ruling in their place during the late Eastern Han Dynasty, these 4 attendants ended up becoming spies on the emperor on behalf of the regent, as they would often misguide the emperor or even withheld key reports and court documents from the emperor himself. So after Emperor Huan overthrew the regent, he replaced all 4 of his Zhongchangshi positions with eunuchs. Then by the time of Emperor Liu Hong, the number of Zhongchangshi was increased from the 4 positions to 10, then to 12, as all of them were being held by eunuchs, as this group eventually gained the infamous nickname of the 10 Eunuchs. Then in addition to being the handlers of all important court documents and the close advisors to the emperor, the eunuchs were also given expanded posts beyond the imperial palace and the imperial court, as a new government department called Xiao Huangmen, or the Little Yellow Gate, was formed, where eunuchs could take posts as military inspectors and even generals. And this became especially problematic during the many rebellions in the period leading up to the Three Kingdoms, as General Lu Zhi was fired on the advice of a eunuch military inspector simply because Lu Zhi refused to bribe him, which severely hampered the early northern response against the Yellow Turban Rebellion, as Lu Zhi's replacement in Dongzhuo was overzealous and led to unnecessary Han losses and setbacks against the Zhang brothers. Also, in the later Liang Rebellion, which followed the Yellow Turban Rebellion, General Zhang Wen was not only not reprimanded for his failed campaign, but instead was promoted to become the Grand Commandant because of fat bribes and his close relationship with the eunuchs, as he was a personal protege of the eunuch Cao Teng, who was also Cao Cao's grandfather. So, to prevent the eunuch problem from ever resurfacing in the Wei dynasty, Cao Pi's first reform was the abolishment of both the Zhongchangshi and Xiaohuangmen posts. In their place is a new post called Sanqi Changshi and Sanqi Shilang, which both roughly translate to single rider attendant, which meant that their job was to be a constant attendant to the emperor and offer advice. But in addition to that, they also had to accompany the emperor as a cavalry bodyguard whenever the emperor is away from the palace, which makes sense as the country was not yet united, and there were many campaigns left for Cao Pi to personally lead, much like his father before him. And of course, eunuchs are not allowed to serve in these two new posts, as each post now offered 4 positions, open to members of the gentry clan, as Cao Pi also saw these posts as good internship opportunities for him to discover talent, as many capable attendants were eventually awarded regional administrator jobs after serving for a period and catching the emperor's eye. In addition to reforming the attendant position, Cao Pi would also forbid eunuchs from holding any position higher than the heads of the palace servants, which basically meant that eunuchs can become the head of the laundry department for the palace or the head of the kitchen, but no higher. And to make sure his descendants would not break these rules or modify it, Cao Pi had this edict forged in metal and stored in the stone room, which is the room where highly classified or important court documents are stored. But eunuchs was not the only problem that doomed the Han, as without powerful regents, eunuch would never have gotten in power in the first place. And regents typically gain power because they're often selected by the Empress Dowager, especially when the late emperor dies young or suddenly, without being able to name regents himself. So it should come as no surprise that when given the opportunity, the Empress Dowager often ends up picking a family member, either in the form of her brother or her father. While this can be viewed as a safe option, as this imperial grandfather or imperial uncle are not going to be direct threats to the child emperor, but because they are family, the child emperor often find that it's impossible to regain imperial power after coming of age if the said grandfather or uncle refuses to relinquish power, since it's very difficult to kill your grandfather or uncle. And to prevent this entirely, Cao Pi issued a new edict regarding the powers of the Empress and the Empress Dowager. First, they may not directly interfere with court politics. Second, the imperial court may not write reports directly to the Empress Dowager. And lastly, the family members of Empress and the Empress Dowager may never be named as regents or receive a title with a land grant. But gutting the powers of these in-laws and eunuchs were not enough for Cao Pi, as he was also worried about the powers of the offshoot branches within the imperial clan itself. And by offshoot branches, I mean his brothers, as the Wei dynasty ended up having one of the strictest set of policies regarding princes and princedoms, all thanks to Cao Pi himself. First, princes must reside in their given land at all times. Second, princes are not allowed to directly contact each other, as all communication with other princes must go through the emperor first. Third, all princedom must be governed by officials selected by the imperial palace, or essentially the chancellors of these princedom are spies for the emperor. And lastly, princes cannot host personal armies or be chosen as regents. Now, the direct result of this is that the princes never had power to rise up during the entire course of the Wei dynasty, even when it became apparent that the Sima clan was retracing the footsteps of the Tao clan, and that the Wei dynasty was doomed to follow the same fate as the Han. And with that, we're going to be ending our episode here, as we have discussed 3 crucial early reforms pushed by Cao Pi, as he thought to correct the errors of the Han dynasty to ensure that his Wei dynasty can become successful for generations to come. But beyond fixing the mistakes of the past, Cao Pi will also be pushing out one critical reform in the 9-tier court structure system that will reshape Chinese court bureaucracies for dynasties to come, as our next episode will focus on how Cao Pi established a delicate balance between imperial power and the gentry power with his 9-tier court structure. So hopefully you all enjoy this episode enough to hit the like button to help out the channel, and I'll see you all next time. Bye!